Hello. Let me continue with the idea of finding a faster way of do this expansion. Now that we have seen how we can do it for the power of 2, let me try it for the power of 3. One plus x cubed. Okay, if I write it out, I get 1 plus x times 1 plus x times 1 plus x. So instead of writing out all the possible combinations one by one, I'm going to try and use the idea from the last video. I want to think about how many ways I want to think directly about how many ways I can pick a term that has a certain number of x in the combination. So let me start from a term with no x. Okay, that's the term with no x. If I want to pick a term with no x by picking one term from each bracket, right? So from each bracket, I'm allowed to pick either 1 or x. So I'll pick either 1 or x from here, either 1 or x from here, either 1 or x from here. And how many ways are there? Can I do it in such a way that I end up with no x? Okay, if I look at the first bracket, to get no x, I have to pick 1. Okay, I can't pick x because then I would have an x. So I have to pick 1 from here, and likewise from next bracket, I have to pick 1, and then here I pick 1. There's only one way I can do it. So I just get 1. I get 1, 1. That's what I get. Now, for the next term, let's think about how many ways we can pick a combination. That means one term from each bracket. That would give me just a single x. So for example, I can pick a 1 from here, I can pick an x from here, I can pick a 1 from here. So that's one way to do it. Or I can think of other ways of doing it. Now at this point, rather than thinking about how many ways we can pick these terms from every bracket, we can actually simplify this idea a little bit. Now if I just want to pick a single x, let's say I pick that x from this bracket, then from the other brackets I have to pick a 1. I can't pick the x, right? If I've already picked an x from one bracket, I can't pick x from the other brackets. So that means that I really only need to worry about picking the x. I don't have to worry about picking the 1s, because once I've decided from which bracket to pick the x, then I'm forced to just pick 1s from the other brackets, so that I would have just the 1x. So now, in order to pick combinations from these brackets that would just give me one single x, all I need is to think about how many ways I can pick a single x from these 3 brackets. So one way is to pick the x from here. That's one way, and not pick x from the rest. Okay. Now the other way is to pick the x from there and not pick x's from here, meaning that I'll just have to pick 1s from there. Or I can also pick the x from here and not pick the x from there. So I can pick the x from either there, there, or there. Okay. So without having to think about the combination with the ones, I can just think about the x. So obviously then, there are three ways I can pick the x. Either from this bracket, or this bracket, or this bracket. So therefore, the term containing x, there would be three of these terms. Okay, so moving on to a term that contain x squared. Okay, so in order to pick terms that would contain x squared, I would have to pick x's from two of the brackets. So let's say if I pick an x from here and an x from this bracket, then I would be forced to pick a one from that bracket. Okay, so in that sense, I don't have to worry about that bracket anymore. All I need is to think about from which two brackets I should pick the x. So I can pick the x from these two brackets. That's one way. I can pick x from, say, those two brackets and not pick an x from there. So just pick the x from those two brackets. That's another way. Or I can pick an x from, say, this bracket and this bracket. That's a third way. And in fact, that's all I can try. Alright, that there are just the three ways I can pick the x squared. So therefore, I end up with 3x squared. So finally, think about how many ways we can pick a combination that would give me x cubed. I need to pick 3x. I need to pick an x from three brackets, from three of the brackets. But then there are only three brackets in this example, so I have to pick an x from here, here, and here. And that's it. There are no other ways I can do it. So there's just the one way I can pick an x from three brackets. So therefore, it's just the one x cubed. Just that one combination that I have. And this therefore is what we would get when we factorize it. Okay, so still a little bit long-winded, a little bit tedious to think about it this way. I mean, we could argue that it would still be faster if I were to expand this the traditional or the long way that we are familiar with. Okay, perhaps, but let's now take this idea one step further. Suppose now that I have 1 plus x to the power of 10. Right, I'm going to have 10 of these factors. 1 plus x times 1 plus x all the way until I have 10 factors. Now, I don't think any of us would want to sit down and actually factorize this the long way. That's going to take all day. Okay, so let's see if we can find some hope in this way to think about it. Right. Starting from the first one. Okay, the first one. I want a term that contains no x again. So this means that I must not pick an x from any of the brackets. And like before, there's only one way we can do it. I have to pick a 1 from each and every bracket. So it's just the one that I get, the one combination. Now, let's look at the next term where we get 1x. So in this case, I have to think about picking just 1x from one of the brackets. We have to think how many ways we can do this. Okay, so I can pick an x from this bracket and not pick x from the other brackets. So I can pick an x from this bracket. That's one way. Or I can pick an x from that bracket. That's another way. And so on. So since there are 10 brackets altogether, therefore there are 10 ways that I can pick the x, alright, from any one of the 10 brackets. So therefore this term would be 10x. Okay, each way of picking an x will give me a term in x. So if I write down all the x that I get, I would have 10 x's that I have to add up. So that's why I'll get 10x. Okay. Next, let's think about the x squared. Now this is going to get a little bit more tricky. To get an x squared, I have to pick an x from 2 of the brackets. So I can pick the x from these 2 brackets, maybe this one and the third bracket, or maybe the second bracket and the third bracket, and so on. Right, you can imagine that it's now going to be a lot more complicated than the first 2 cases. There are many more ways that we can do this. Okay, so from the 10 brackets, I have to think of how many ways I can pick 2 of the brackets. Pick x from 2 of the brackets. So it's like a problem in which I have 10 objects. I have to think about how many ways I can pick 2 of them. Now in a later video, maybe much later, I would talk about a topic called permutation and combination. Now in this topic, I will explain a formula that would allow us to calculate an answer to just such a problem of how many ways we can pick 2 of the brackets out of 10. Okay, the problem is called a combination problem, and the formula is given by this. If okay, let me write this out. The problem here is that I have to pick 2 of the 10 brackets. That's what I have to do, right? Now the formula is this. I have to take 10 factorial and divide that by 2 factorial, okay, and 10 minus 2 factorial. So this is the formula that we would learn. This is the formula that we would learn in a later video in this topic. So for now, let me just introduce this formula and we can just use it first. Okay, so I'm going to skip the explanation about why the formula looks like this. Now, if you have not learned about what a factorial is, if you've not learned about this, let me just write this in a form that can be used more directly. So this form or this formula can be simplified into 10 times 9 and 2 times 1. Okay, 10 times 9 and 2 times 1. The 10 comes from the power of 10. Okay, the 9 is 1 unit less than the 10. And the 2 here comes from the 2 here, that we want to pick the x from 2 of the brackets. So this is going to give me, then this would be the number of ways I can actually pick the x from 2 of the 10 brackets. Right. So let me write this down. 10 times 9 over 2 times 1 x squared. So that's what I would get. Now if I then want to go on and do it for x cubed, okay, then the pattern is this. I get a 10 times 9 here. The pattern for the next one will be 10 times 9 times 8. And for the bottom will be 3 times 2 times 1. Okay, so we have a formula in which there is a pattern. That's for x cubed, and so on. And when we add all this up, we get our expansion for this 1 plus x to the power of 10.